Hello everybody. Unit 6 then. Ensure your own actions reduce risks to health and safety. We're looking at this unit, which should cover around about 30 guided learning hours of inputs in terms of research, in terms of gathering the evidence and compiling it and uploading it to one file. The aim of this unit is to help you ensure that your personal presentation, your behaviour, meets the required instructions and procedures, I suppose, of your workplace. So, there are 4 outcomes for this unit. Now, with this unit, I really recommend that you use photography, that you use video, as well to illustrate your competence in these areas. So let's start with outcome 1. So outcome 1, understand hazards and risks in the workplace. So you need to, first of all, define what a risk and hazard actually is. So hazard, a danger of a risk, define that for me. A risk being something of a situation, I suppose, involving exposure to said hazards. Elaborate on that, define it quickly, succinctly. A sentence or two will be perfectly acceptable for this. You can even combine it with 1.2. Outline key hazards and risks in your workplace. So be specific and tie it to your workplace. Give me examples, be precise. Describe safe working practices in terms of keeping cables nice and tidy, making sure there's a fire extinguisher nearby, making sure there's fire exits, making sure that your workspace is appropriate, making sure you have regular breaks from your screen and so on. 1.3, outline key hazards and risks within your own job role and describe precautions that you've undertaken to keep these hazards and risks in check. So describe the precautions, what you actually do to safeguard against these things here. In your job role, outline for me, then describe them. Describe basically means give me an example, show me you know how you've gone about safeguarding against the actual hazards or risks taking place. Outcome 2. So, understand own responsibilities for health and safety in the workplace. So for this, you need to identify your own responsibilities in your own workplace. So again, tie it to your job role. So health and safety regulation and legislation, you might want to have a look at the Health and Safety at Work Act of 1974, which is still the basis for the regulations and rules and procedures that we abide by now in the workplace. Here you need to explain the importance of personal presentation and behaviour. Why does that matter? Why does that have any relevance? Why is that useful in terms of health and safety? The way we present ourselves and our behaviour in terms of being organised, tidy, precise, looking after our workspace, making sure our procedures in terms of certain keys being in certain places, certain items being in certain places at certain times. Why does that matter? In terms of 2.2, describe procedures. So, procedures for dealing with risks outside the scope of your own responsibility. So, you've got your responsibility as outlined here, but outside of your responsibility, there are other things that will occur that you may need to speak to somebody else about. Who are the appropriate personnel? Often it's your line manager, but specify who it is and how you would go about liaising with them, contacting them to discuss said risks. For outcome 3, I want you to identify workplace instructions. So in your job, are there any particular rules, regulations, codes of conduct, lists of things to do, not do, in terms of using social media, in terms of presentation and behaviour, in terms of the way that you look after your workspace? Again, relevant to your own job, identify the workplace instructions. They may well have them available for you to just grab and use and to paste into a document potentially and to annotate. for this outcome. For 3.2, identify again, so find it, the unsafe practices in your own workplace and job role. So are there any particularly troublesome, risky, hazardous incidents or practices, or potentially hazardous practices in your workplace? People not tidying up after themselves, maybe. People not clipping cables together. People not taking breaks from their screen. Repetitive strain injury, something that your generation's going to have to be contending with seriously, particularly in creative media jobs. How do you safeguard against that? In terms of 3.3, check which potentially unsafe working practice presents the highest risk to yourself and others. So in your job, what has the highest risk to you and other people? 3.4, take action to address any hazards in accordance with workplace procedures and legal requirements. So take action. That might be sending an email to identify something's not quite right, potentially. Having a conversation with your line manager. If you've done that and you've got evidence of you doing that, then print screen that evidence. That'd be fantastic. Alternatively, it might be hypothetical. So what you would do in light of this, for example, what you would do if you were to identify a hazard or a risk in the workplace. Would you email someone? Would you talk to them? Would you try and deal with it yourself? Probably best not to do that. Probably best to follow that line of command. Okay, so now on to the last outcome for this unit, Unit 6. Again, capture evidence via photography, video, screencasting like I'm doing now as well to show evidence of this. I think it's going to be a more effective way to capture the evidence. So, work safely in accordance with your own level of competence. So if you've got training about lifting heavy boxes and such, then that's working within your competence. You've demonstrated competence and capability to do this. Work safely in accordance with relevant instructions and legal requirements. So following environmentally friendly practices. Now this is a bit of a convoluted sentence here, so we'll break it down. So for this, you need to demonstrate that you can reduce risks, essentially, in your workplace. How can you work safely in accordance with your own level of competence, relevant instructions and legal requirements? So the way you can demonstrate that is to outline, to write, to record a vlog or a podcast potentially, or show photographs of you showing how you've set up your desk neatly, nicely, the screen level with your eyes as you're sat back straight on the actual seat you are working in. You may want to vlog that potentially. In terms of environmentally friendly practices, you talk about how eco-friendly your workplace is. Are you completely digital now? Do you work paperless? If so, that would be a good example to illustrate here. For 4.1, show me how you work safely in accordance with your competence, instructions from your bosses, and legal requirements as well. For 4.2, managing your, or rather any, health and safety risks. So, within your own capability and responsibility. So, how have you managed any health and safety risks? Have you actually got any examples whereby you've had to deal with a situation to actually take the lead yourself and manage it yourself, any health and safety risks? Or has it all been in your boss's remit? 4.2 may be difficult for you to answer. If that is the case, and feel free to illustrate what you would do that is within your remit, that is within your capability to do so. What is your responsibility to do so? But if you haven't yet had that chance to do so, then please say so. But give a hypothetical again. Say what you would do. Is there anything that would happen ever? For example, someone spilling coffee over a keyboard that perhaps you could take responsibility for. For 4.3, suggest ways of reducing risks and health and safety, and reducing it and suggesting ways of doing so to the appropriate personnel. Have you spoken to your bosses, your line managers, about perhaps putting anything into practice? You may have identified something from the previous outcomes when you highlighted the highest risks and hazards in your workplace. So what could you perhaps suggest to your boss in terms of reducing risks to health and safety to your line manager? Give an example. Again, be precise. The more specific, the better, always. For 4.4, report any differences between workplace and suppliers or manufacturers' instructions. When you're working for a client, when you're on location, on set, or working remotely, or working with somebody else, another school potentially, whoever it is you're working for, are there any differences between the instructions you've been given in terms of the workspace, in terms of the people, in terms of the resources? Because if there's any differences between the instructions, and that could lead to a bit of a conflict or potential issues and people looking to blame each other as to how this could happen. Consistency and standardisation is really important. So if you do have that, you need to report these differences. Have you encountered any situations whereby that's happened, where your job and the client, supplier, manufacturer, it's been different? Give an example of that. If you can't think of any examples, again, a hypothetical example would be perfectly acceptable. Any issues about that, feel free to message me and I'll be able to guide you through that. For the last one for this quite lengthy unit is ensuring that your own personal presentation, the way you're dressed, the way you style your hair, your makeup and so on, and your behaviour, the way you actually conduct yourself in person, your interpersonal skills, your interaction with people, it meets the requirements of relevant instructions, procedures and legal requirements. So being polite, professional, and above all else, able to fulfill your role and to do what's expected of you. How do you ensure that your presentation and behaviour meets these requirements? Are there literally written requirements in your job? Or is it very much a sort of informal thing between yourself and your boss as to what is expected? How do you ensure this? Right, now this is notoriously quite a difficult unit because it's a bit dry, and I appreciate that. So jazz it up with pictures, videos, podcasts, screencasts to demonstrate this knowledge, because you've all got the ability to actually demonstrate this. It's simply a case of capturing that evidence. If you manage to capture a video or photograph that hits 2, 3, 4 bits of criteria at once, that's wonderful. Don't hesitate to do that, alright? So any questions, please contact me, alright? It's important that you do that because we use Google Classroom, as you know, but I'm also available on Twitter as well. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter if you need anything at all, alright? See you later.